Mark woke up feeling different. His throat was dry and scratchy, and each swallow felt uncomfortable. As he sat up in bed, a dull ache spread through his body. His head felt heavy, and he noticed a slight fever warming his skin. Mark blinked a few times, trying to shake off the discomfort, but it lingered. He glanced at the clock on his nightstand. 7:45 a.m. sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, casting a pale glow on the room. Mark let out a soft cough, wincing as the pain returned in his throat. "Great," he muttered, his voice hoarse. He knew he had to do something about it. Staying in bed all day wouldn't help, but the idea of seeing a doctor made him hesitate. Not because he feared the visit, but because he wasn't confident speaking English in such a situation. Mark had moved to the city just a few months ago. Though his English had improved, the thought of explaining his symptoms clearly felt daunting. What if he used the wrong words? What if they didn't understand him? He reached for his phone, searching for a nearby clinic. A few options appeared, and one was only a 10-minute walk from his apartment. Mark considered waiting a few days to see if he'd feel better, but the discomfort in his throat made the decision for him. He had to go. Throwing on a sweater, he grabbed his wallet and keys. Before leaving, he paused at the mirror near the door. His face was pale, and his eyes looked tired. He took a deep breath. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "Just explain how you feel. Fever, sore throat, tired." With those words repeating in his mind, he stepped out into the cool morning air, determined to face both his discomfort and the challenge of communicating in English. The clinic was a small, modern building with large glass windows. A sign near the entrance read, "Walk-ins welcome," which gave Mark a bit of relief. He hadn't made an appointment, but hoped they would still be able to see him. As he stepped inside, the scent of hand sanitizer filled the air. The waiting area was quiet, with a few patients sitting in chairs along the wall, flipping through magazines or scrolling on their phones. A soft instrumental tune played in the background, blending with the occasional sound of a phone ringing at the reception desk. Mark approached the front counter, where a middle-aged receptionist with short blonde hair greeted him with a polite smile. She wore a light blue uniform and a name tag that read, "Susan." "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" she asked gently, her eyes meeting his. Mark hesitated for a moment. He felt his throat tightening, but he forced himself to respond clearly. No. I am not feeling well. I have a sore throat and a fever. Can I see a doctor today?" Susan nodded and handed him a clipboard with a small stack of papers. "Of course. Please fill out this form. It asks for basic information and a description of your symptoms. When you are done, just bring it back here." Mark took the clipboard and sat down in one of the empty chairs. His hands felt clammy as he scanned the form. The questions were simple: name, date of birth, symptoms, medications, emergency contact. He wrote carefully, pausing when he reached the section for symptoms. What words should I use? He thought. Sore throat? Fever? He decided to keep it basic, writing sore throat, fever, tired. Returning the clipboard to the desk, he offered a slight smile. I am done. Susan took the form, scanned it briefly, then nodded. Thank you, Mark. The doctor will see you soon. Please take a seat. Mark nodded and returned to his chair. He could feel his pulse slowing down a bit. The first step was done. Now all he could do was wait and hope the conversation with the doctor would be just as smooth. Mark sat quietly in the waiting area, his fingers tapping lightly on his knee. The soft hum of the air conditioning filled the room, blending with the occasional page flip from a nearby magazine. He watched the other patients, trying not to focus on the ache in his throat. A young woman across the room was reading a book, while an older man scrolled through his phone, occasionally rubbing his forehead. Everyone seemed calm, but Mark couldn't shake the tightness in his chest. What if the doctor asks me something I don't understand? What if I say the wrong word? He had faced language challenges before ordering food, asking for directions, but this felt more serious. He didn't want to get his health wrong. Mark reminded himself of the basics he had practiced earlier. Sore throat, fever, tired. Simple words, clear enough. He glanced at the posters on the wall. One showed a diagram of the human body with labels: head, throat, chest, stomach. Another explained common flu symptoms: cough, fever, body aches. See, I already know these words. I can do this. A nurse in light green scrubs stepped out from the hallway. Mark Evans? She called, holding a clipboard. Mark stood, heart pounding slightly. That's me. The nurse gave him a warm smile. The doctor will see you now. Please follow me. As he followed her down the hallway, Mark took a deep breath, the clean scent of the clinic sharp in the air. He felt nervous, but prepared. The door to the exam room opened, and he stepped inside, ready for the next part of his visit. The exam room was small but tidy, with light blue walls and a large poster displaying the human respiratory system. Mark sat on the examination table, his hands resting on his lap, feeling the crisp paper crinkle beneath him. A few moments later, the door opened, and a tall man in a white coat entered, holding a tablet. His short brown hair was neatly combed, and his expression was calm and professional. Good morning, Mark. I am Dr. Collins. How are you feeling today? Mark swallowed, the soreness in his throat reminding him why he was there. "Not great, actually. I have a sore throat, a fever, and I feel really tired." Dr. Collins nodded, making a note on his tablet. "I see. How long have you been feeling this way?" Mark hesitated for a second, searching for the right words. "Since yesterday morning, I think. It got worse last night." The doctor looked up. "Any coughing? Body aches? Runny nose?" Mark shook his head. "No, just my throat and fever." "All right. Let's take a look." Dr. Collins washed his hands, then gently examined Mark's throat using a small flashlight. "Please say." Mark opened his mouth wide. The doctor nodded. "Your throat is a bit red and inflamed. I'll check your temperature now." He placed a digital thermometer against Mark's forehead. After a few seconds, it beeped. 100.4 F. "That's a mild fever," Dr. Collins explained with a reassuring tone. "You probably have a viral infection, like a common cold or mild flu." Mark exhaled, relieved it didn't seem too serious. "So do I need medicine?" The doctor smiled slightly. "I'll prescribe something to help with the fever and throat pain, but rest and fluids will be the most important. You should start feeling better in a few days." Mark nodded, processing the instructions. "Okay. Should I stay home from work?" "Yes. I recommend resting for at least a day or two. It'll help you recover faster and avoid spreading germs to others." Dr. Collins tapped on his tablet, finalizing the prescription. "I'm sending this directly to your pharmacy. The instructions are simple. Take the pain reliever every 6 hours if needed." Mark felt a wave of relief. The conversation had been easier than he expected. "Thank you, doctor," he said, his voice already sounding slightly clear. "You are welcome, Mark. If your symptoms get worse or don't improve in a few days, come back and see me. Take care." Mark remained seated on the examination table as Dr. Collins finished typing on his tablet. The soft clicking of the keys filled the quiet room for a moment before the doctor looked up, his expression calm and reassuring. "All right, Mark," he began. "Your symptoms suggest a mild viral infection, most likely a cold. It's nothing too serious, but it's important to take care of yourself so you can recover quickly." Mark nodded, feeling a sense of relief, but he wanted to be sure he understood everything clearly. "So, I don't need antibiotics?" Dr. Collins shook his head gently. "No, antibiotics only work for bacterial infections, and this seems viral. Rest, hydration, and over-the-counter medication should be enough." Mark listened carefully, trying to absorb the instructions. The doctor continued, speaking clearly and patiently. "I've prescribed ibuprofen to help reduce your fever and throat pain. You should take one tablet every 6 hours if needed. Make sure to drink plenty of water and get enough rest. Avoid cold drinks, as they can irritate your throat further. Mark repeated the key points in his mind. Ibuprofen, rest, water. What about food? Should I avoid anything? He asked. Dr. Collins smiled slightly. Stick to soft foods if your throat hurts. Soups, oatmeal, yogurt. Avoid spicy or very acidic foods for now. Mark nodded again, feeling more confident. Okay, and if it doesn't get better, if your fever lasts more than 3 days or your symptoms get worse, come back for a follow-up. Otherwise, you should feel better soon. The doctor handed him a small printout with the medication instructions and a reminder about his prescription being sent to the pharmacy. Mark stood up, tucking the paper into his pocket. Thank you, Doctor. I really appreciate your help. Dr. Collins extended a hand for a brief, reassuring shake. You are welcome, Mark. Take care and get well soon. Mark left the exam room feeling lighter, both from relief and the sense of having successfully navigated the conversation. Mark stepped back into the hallway, feeling slightly better now that he had a clear diagnosis and instructions. The soreness in his throat was still present, but knowing what to do made him feel more in control. He walked toward the reception desk, where Susan, the receptionist, was finishing a phone call. She offered him a polite smile as he approached. Everything all set? She asked kindly. Mark nodded. Yes, the doctor said it's a mild infection. He sent a prescription to the pharmacy. Susan tapped a few keys on her computer. Great. I'll just need you to settle the visit fee now. Mark shifted slightly, hoping he understood correctly. How much is it? That will be $85 for the consultation. He reached for his wallet and handed her his debit card. As she processed the payment, he felt the tension from earlier starting to ease. The card machine beeped, and she handed him a receipt along with a small paper summary of his visit. This receipt confirms your payment, and here is a summary of your visit with the doctor's recommendations and the prescription details. You can pick up the medication at any pharmacy nearby. Mark glanced at the paper. The instructions were clearly printed. Ibuprofen, every 6 hours as needed. Rest and hydrate. He felt reassured by the clarity. Thank you, he said sincerely, tucking the receipt into his pocket. Susan smiled warmly. Feel better soon, Mark. Let us know if you need anything else. Mark nodded and headed toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open, and the cool breeze outside greeted him as he stepped back onto the street. Now, he had one last stop to make: the pharmacy. Mark walked a few blocks down the street to a small neighborhood pharmacy. The glass windows displayed posters about seasonal flu shots and vitamins. He stepped inside, the door chiming softly as he entered. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the shelves were neatly stocked with medications, snacks, and personal care items. Approaching the counter, Mark noticed a young pharmacist with short, dark hair organizing bottles behind the register. She looked up and greeted him with a friendly smile. "Hi there. How can I help you today?" Mark cleared his throat, feeling a bit more confident after his visit to the clinic. "Hi. I have a prescription from Dr. Collins. It should be under Mark Evans." The pharmacist nodded and typed his name into the computer. "Let me check. Ah, yes. Ibuprofen, 200 milligrams. Give me a moment to prepare it for you." As she turned to retrieve the medication, Mark scanned the shelves nearby. He noticed items like throat lozenges, cough syrup, and tissues, all things he might have needed just a day earlier. The pharmacist returned with a small white bag and a clear plastic pill bottle inside. She placed it gently on the counter. "All right, here is your medication. The instructions are simple. Take 1 tablet every 6 hours if you have pain or fever. Avoid taking it on an empty stomach. Do you have any questions?" Mark hesitated for a moment, wanting to be sure he fully understood. What if my fever gets worse?" She nodded, maintaining her calm, helpful tone. "If it doesn't improve after a few days, or if your fever rises, you should return to the doctor. Otherwise, this should help manage your symptom." Mark exhaled with relief. "Got it. Thank you." The pharmacist rang up the purchase. "That will be $12.5. Mark paid and received his receipt along with the medication. "Thanks again. Have a good day." "You too. Feel better soon." As Mark stepped out of the pharmacy, the sun peeked through the clouds, and he felt a small sense of accomplishment. He had managed the entire experience, the clinic, the diagnosis, and picking up his medication all in English. And now, it was time to rest and recover. Mark arrived back at his apartment, feeling both tired and relieved. The visit to the clinic and pharmacy had been smoother than he expected, and he felt proud of how he had managed to explain his symptoms clearly in English. After setting the small white pharmacy bag on the kitchen counter, he poured himself a glass of water and took the first ibuprofen tablet, carefully following the instructions. The cool water soothed his throat slightly, and he sat down on the couch, thinking about the experience he had just gone through. It wasn't just about feeling sick, it was about facing a situation where language had once felt like a barrier. Yet, he had done it. I described my symptoms. I asked questions. I understood the instructions. The more he reflected, the more he realized how important it had been to use simple words and stay calm. He remembered how nervous he had felt in the waiting room, worrying about saying the wrong thing. But in the end, he hadn't needed perfect grammar or complex sentences, just clear, honest communication. Mark thought back to the key phrases that had helped him. I have a sore throat and a fever. Do you have an appointment? Take one tablet every 6 hours. Simple, direct, effective. He made a mental note to continue practicing English, especially for situations like this, where clarity mattered most. It wasn't just about learning words, it was about feeling prepared and confident. The room felt quieter now, the ache in his throat slightly better. Mark closed his eyes, letting the calm settle over him. He had faced his discomfort, both physical and linguistic, and come out stronger on the other side. And that, he thought, was progress.